You're listening to the best local sports show. Boots, Bats and Balls on Six Towns Radio.
Hello, I'm Ross Hancock and welcome to Boots, Bats and Balls on Six Towns Radio. Today I have another former Potter joining me for my Pottering About series with ex-Manchester City, Tranmere Rovers, Mansfield Town, Stoke City and current Wellington Phoenix assistant boss, Chris Greenacre. Joins us all the way from Wellington in New Zealand. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Now, I would normally say good morning or good afternoon, but good evening, Chris. It's around 8 o'clock there.
It is, yeah. It takes a little bit. It takes a little bit getting used to the time difference, but yeah, we're about 12 or 13 hours difference now, so it's late evening here.
And I thought I had to get your thoughts on your career because it's taken quite an interesting trajectory. How did the move to New Zealand occur?
An old teammate of mine, Gareth Edds at Tranmere, was given the opportunity to come back to Australia. Basically, the Socceroos were trying to get all the Australian players back to Australia. And to cut a long story short, basically, he wasn't ready to come back to Australia. And he just said, is it something that you would fancy? And not thinking for a second that I'd be here, you know, I said, yeah, no problem. I'll speak to your agent. And as I say, long story short, I ended up coming here. I was fully aware of the A-League, obviously with the footage that we have in the UK. I think there's a show that was on every week, so I was kind of aware of what was going on. And there was a number of my teammates kind of all saying that they wouldn't mind trying something different. And again, not thinking for a second I would be here, got the opportunity, and here I am.
Because it is quite a big step, isn't it? It's not like you move in a couple of towns across a couple of 100 miles. It's literally thousands of miles and, you know, a whole another hemisphere. So was it a difficult decision to make?
It was a difficult decision, but to be honest, what made it a little bit easier was, you know, firstly my wife was fully behind the move, and our families were fully behind us going. And the difference between a contract over here in the UK was that the power is with the player rather than the club. So initially, if you sign a 2-year contract, which I did, the power is with the player. So if I decided that I didn't like it here, it wasn't for me, I have an option on the second year, so I could tell the club by about Christmas time that I didn't want to take up the option of the second year, and the contract is kind of ripped up. So at the worst, I arrived here I think in the May, and I would have been back in the UK by the February. So it was kind of initially a small stint to say, look, we'll give it a go and see how we like things. But fortunately, we came to New Zealand and the move was fantastic. You know, everyone around the club was absolutely brilliant, and we've made it our home, and we're here sort of 4 years later. My wife's quite happy here. She's working at the football club. I've enjoyed 3 years of playing and a year as an assistant coach. So kind of, hopefully here for the foreseeable future.
So would you recommend to other footballers that they move to the A-League?
Absolutely. I think at times on shows such as Soccer AM and all that kind of stuff, the league gets a little bit of a disrespect in a sense. They seem to show like a bloopers show, I think, every week of you know, poor decisions made in the A-League. But you know, you go up and down, you know, the 4 divisions in the UK, and those mistakes are made week in and week out. But you get a show that just shows, you know, what's going on, and you know, suddenly people sort of disrespect it. But you know, obviously it was great with Emil Heskey and Del Piero coming to the league last year to show that the league is actually a decent quality. And you know, I'd recommend any of the players in the UK to you know, if it's something they fancy doing, then taking it up. I certainly haven't looked back. There are 1 or 2 restrictions over here with rules and regulations regarding overseas players and import spots, as we call them. So if you fall into that criteria of an import spot, or if you're fortunate enough to be a marquee player, you know, I would fully recommend anyone giving it a go.
Because like you said, the standard of football, there's a couple of higher profile players, should I say, have gone to A-League recently. So how does the standard of football compare to the standard in England?
I get sort of asked this all the time, and you know, it's difficult to gauge it. I'd probably say maybe sort of lower championship level. It's a good standard. Stadiums that we play at are fantastic stadiums. You know, the the weather's obviously fantastic. We obviously play all of our away games in Australia, so it's great from a lifestyle point of view to go and see different places. But to be honest, as I say, the standards gone up, and obviously you don't attract the players like Del Piero and Aneleschi to the league without it being decent. But obviously, you know, I've had a couple of friends back in the UK who've happened to see one or two games on the internet, and they've looked at the game and said it was a bit slow. And I said, well, you didn't realise that it was 42 degrees at the time, and suddenly people appreciate what you're playing in. And I'm just this white lad from Northern England playing in 42 degrees, and suddenly, you know, I've usually got a pina colada in my hand when I'm in those types of temperatures. But no, it's a great experience, and you know, one that I would recommend to anyone.
And you just mentioned it then. You said how you've been to Australia for every away game. Now, is it like 1,000 miles or something like that? It's quite a long journey, isn't it, between New Zealand and Australia?
Yeah, we use Sydney as the main port of call, so all our flights are from Wellington to Sydney, which is about 3 hours, and then we use that as a port. Obviously, we fly on to other ports, Melbourne, Adelaide, you know, Perth, which is the longest away trip in world football. And not only is it the longest away trip, there's a 5-hour time difference between Perth and Wellington. So, you know, an evening kick-off in Perth at 7:30 is, you know, gone midnight in Wellington for us. So we have to go on that trip a little bit earlier, you know, a few days earlier than we would normally. But no, it's quite exciting, a bit unique, and yeah, it's still enjoying it.
And last season, you stepped into the manager's hot seat as well as the assistant managers. You were interim manager after, is it Ricky Herbert left? What was it like being the main man? What was it like being the manager rather than the assistant? Is it something that you'd like to do again?
I think coming into it, obviously with an assistant coach role, being only in the job for probably about 7 or 8 months, I think it was. I kind of didn't have a direction of where I really wanted to be. I got no ambition of what I wanted. Well, did I want to be a head coach? Did I want to be an assistant coach? And obviously, you know, there's been a number of high-profile coaches who found that the assistant coach was their niche in life and are very, very good at that. You know, I suppose Brian Kidd or someone like that really springs to mind. So I really didn't have a thought of what I really wanted to do, and then you're thrown in at the deep end, and trust me, it really is a hot seat. You're thrown in there, but it really gave me sort of a direction of what it would entail being a head coach. And even though it was only for 5 games, it was the best learning experience I could ever imagine. There are no courses to sort of prepare you for what it is actually like, and the first sort of 3 or 4 days before the game was sort of the most stressful I think I've ever had in my whole career. You know, I've played in some decent games, some pretty big games. You know, those mainly at Stoke, to be honest, and there's nothing that really prepares you for that. And what it showed me was that I probably wouldn't be afraid of a head coach's role. Not anytime soon. I'm not ready for it yet, but it kind of gave me a little bit of an insight of what it's like, and it's something that, you know, in the long term, you know, it's something that I probably would like to do in the end. But, you know, I'm not ready for that yet.
In a similar question to before, I mentioned about footballers moving to the A-League. Would you suggest to young coaches that they move to the A-League? You know, is there quite a lot of room for progression?
There is and there isn't. I must admit I quite like the thought of myself sort of getting on with my job and learning doing the hard yards over here, I suppose kind of out of the limelight of the UK. You know, I'm getting quite a lot of experience. I'm working in a professional environment, you know, working with professional players. For young coaches, it's a little bit more difficult over here because obviously there are only 10 teams in the league, so there aren't 92 league clubs where there are, you know, quite a lot of jobs. You know, the jobs are few and far between. But what is interesting, when I arrived here, out of my whole squad, there was only myself that had any kind of coaching qualifications, whereas in the UK, I think at my last club, Tranmere, there was probably 6 or 7 of us in the first 11 with coaching qualifications. So I'm fortunate in that sense that I've kind of got a head start on the other players who are probably finishing their careers here shortly. So if there's an opportunity for a young coach to come out here and they get a job here, then I'd definitely go for it. Do the hard yards and then see where that takes you.
Now, it sounds like you are quite enjoying it in New Zealand, but have you got any plans to return to England one day?
Never say never, but to be quite honest, while ever I've got a job in New Zealand, I'm really, really happy here. We're the only professional club in New Zealand, so again, jobs are few and far between here. So hopefully the foreseeable future sees me here. I've got another year and a half left on the contract. And if the club offered me a long-term contract tomorrow, I would take it. That's how happy I am. I'm working under a very, very good head coach in America at the moment. He replaced Ricky Herbert, who himself is in an elite group of coaches who have played at the World Cup and also coached at the World Cup with New Zealand in 2010 in South Africa, and then Ernie Merrick, who's won the A-League on a couple of occasions. So I'm really, I've had some real mentors there, and hopefully that can continue, and I'm here for the long haul.
And now we're talking about England, I'd like to go into your own footballing career in England. You started at Leeds before signing for Man City on schoolboy terms, going professional in '95. Now, you only featured in 8 games at Main Road, but Man City at the time were definitely the smaller of the two Manchester clubs. What was it like for you at Man City personally, Chris? Have you got a lot to thank them for in terms of development?
Absolutely. The youth development programme that we had at Main Road was absolutely fantastic. And out of my youth team, I think there's probably 7 or 8 of us who've all made a living out of the game. Probably the main one would be Michael Brown, who's at Leeds now. Brownie made a lot of appearances in the Premier League. And there's probably 7 or 8 of us that have really made a living out of the game, which is great. So the youth development programme that they had there was fantastic. In the end, I had 3 years on my contract left, and Joe Royle came in and decided he didn't want sort of smaller strikers, and that's football's about opinions, and I kind of had, obviously I was disappointed to leave a club like that, but it really was a catalyst to sort of get my career up and running, and that's what gave me the opportunity to go and play regular first team football, and I kind of wanted to use in all due respect, Mansfield as a stepping stone to hopefully get back up to playing higher league football. And, Billy did, and at Mansfield Town gave me that opportunity. And although, I probably went a little bit stale at Man City, I was playing reserve games and going out on loan. Sort of, I think I had 3 or 4 loans, or maybe 4 or 5 loans, to try and, get my career up and running. And, that's what happened, unfortunately.
Like you say, you did go to Mansfield and you scored almost 50 goals in 3 seasons, which isn't a very bad return at all. And you moved to Stoke in 2002 under Steve Cotterill. What did you make of Steve? Because he's not really held in high regard by most Stoke fans, it's got to be said.
No, I mean, as I said, I moved to Mansfield and thankfully I got my career back on track and sort of got back to playing regular first team football and scoring quite a few goals, and that got me the opportunity to move to Stoke. And obviously I've kind of got mixed feelings about my time at Stoke. Obviously I came there and was in really good form. I was scoring goals. I had a really good pre-season, and then I got injured in my last pre-season game against West Brom, and I did my ankle and I was out for 3 months. And that was probably the most disappointing part of my time at Stoke, because actually the week that I got back to train, Steve went to Sunderland, obviously went as Howard Wilkinson's assistant, and as a new player coming to a club and not really getting a chance or the opportunity to actually work with a coach, kind of leaves you in a little bit of a dilemma, because you don't know what kind of coach is going to come in. A coach would come in and you not be his type of player, and there's a lot of scenarios that can go on, or you can be quite lucky and there's a coach that really likes you. So I understand why Steve moved. Obviously the opportunity to go to a massive club at the time, because they were in the Premier League and we were Championship, so I kind of understand it from his personal point of view. But as I say, that's what happens in football. People move on, and I was kind of left at Stoke, and that's just how it went. And
Tony Pulis stepped in to replace him, kept Stoke up that year. What was he like to work for?
Oh, I mean, Tony was fantastic, and I think what he's done for the football club was absolutely phenomenal. Initially that was our main aim, was to stay up in the Championship, and I remember playing in the last game of the season against Reading. I think Adi Akinbayi scored and kept us up, and that was a fantastic achievement for us. From a personal point of view, I came back in, I was probably a little bit rusty, and I think I played 18 games and scored 6 goals, and so my ratio had gone down a little bit. I think like to 1 in 3 or whatever it was. And then the following season, obviously Tony, had his kind of style and the way he wanted to play, and brought in, I think Gifton came in, and Carlos Farber came in, and those sort of bigger type strikers, which again, that's about opinions, and that's how Tony likes to play, and he's been very, very successful with that kind of striker. And I probably found in the second year, I think I hardly played. I was on the bench and not even in the squad at times, which was quite disappointing. Obviously, just because you just want to play, you're playing, you've got a fantastic club, a big club, got a massive fan base who were absolutely, tremendous to me while I was there. And then in my last year, I played a lot of games in midfield, which going from scoring, sort of 50 odd goals at Mansfield, sort of scoring regularly, to then being kind of just doing a job, which in all fairness, you don't want to just do a job. Although it is about the team, I wanted to get back to doing, sort of what I thought I did best, and, probably, didn't get the most luck in playing up front, and that's probably the disappointing thing about being at Stoke. But looking back on my career, I wouldn't swap that for anything. It was a great club. I was fortunate enough to play in some big games there. The game against Reading where we stayed up, and playing against Chelsea in the FA Cup, and down at Highbury against Arsenal, were things, games that I would never ever want to change. And I look back with my time at Stoke as a great time, and I wouldn't swap it. I really wouldn't swap it now I've retired.
Do you feel like you're given a fair chance at Stoke?
Probably not as a striker, I don't think. That would be the only thing I would change. Is it would have got more of an opportunity to play up front and sort of get a real run in the team. That I was never a striker. I was never a player who kind of, if the manager got me, at times Tony did, or bowling, ramping or raising, he used to just make me more determined to in training and all that kind of stuff. And, I prided myself on being a good pro and training really, really hard. And, I remember Tony saying to me once, I wish I had more players like you who kind of just accepted it and got on with my job without sort of wanting to blame everyone else why I wasn't playing, and, that kind of sort of attitude. And, I kind of prided myself on that. But as I say, I'd love to go for a beer tomorrow with Tony. We never had a falling out or anything. It was a real amicable time, and I wish him all the very best in his next project.
And like you say, he struggled to really get going at Stoke. He did show some promise, but you were released in 2005. But you joined Tranmere Rovers, where I think you rebuilt your career again, really, and showed maybe why it was a mistake for Stoke to let you go. Finished top scorer for 3 seasons, I think, at Prenton Park.
Yeah, I did. I think what happened with Stoke. Tony said to me that he would like me to have stayed at the club, and then my agent, we spoke with the club, and they basically was saying, I couldn't guarantee that I was going to play up front regularly. So you kind of, as a player, you're always told play as high as you can for as long as you can, and I had to sort of weigh that up. Do I want to possibly spend a lot of time playing in midfield and maybe not scoring goals, which I love doing? And then spoke to Brian Little at Tranmere, and he basically said to me, look, you're going to come here, you're going to play week in and week out, and get back to scoring goals again. And I think financially as well, there wouldn't have been a great deal of difference in doing that. So if I would have stayed at Stoke, it probably would have been on the same kind of contract. So you've got all these issues that you've got to weigh up as a player, and then went to Tranmere, and again, great opportunity to go and play regularly under Brian Little, who was a great coach to me. And Tranmere had been in the playoffs for the last 3 years, I think. So at the time, it was like, go to a club that's going to be pushing for promotion, and hopefully I could be back up in the Championship with Stoke again. But we finished 18th, and I think I finished with about 18 goals that year, and we just about stayed up with about 2 games to go, which wasn't the best, and had a probably another 2 or 3, a couple of good years after that as well, and equalled John Aldridge's, record of the top scorer for 3 seasons on the run, and which was a nice little achievement. But it was a good move, and I enjoyed my time at Tranmere. But in my last year, I got injured just before Christmas, or around about Christmas. I think I fractured my foot, and I was out for about 8 weeks. And then in a testimonial game, on my comeback sort of game, I played in a testimonial game and did my medial ligament. So that meant I was out from Christmas all the way up to the end of the season. So it wasn't the most pleasant of last year's, I'm afraid.
But what I want to know as well is how difficult it is being on the other side of the world, keeping in touch with the people that you played with, and your coaches, your fellow staff and players. Is it quite difficult to keep in contact with people?
It's a lot easier than I suppose it was at one time. I mean, with Skype and all that kind of stuff, it's fantastic. I mean, if I could only maybe phone people like you could years ago, then I think it would have been a lot more difficult. Obviously, with social media now, with Facebook and all that kind of thing, it's really easy to keep in contact with players. And it's funny, actually, I had contact with Adi Akinbaye about 3 weeks ago. So we've got all players now who are sort of retiring and trying to stay in the game, be coaches, be agents, you name it. And it's funny how football brings people back together, which is cool. So yeah, it's getting easier and easier to remain in contact with people.
And I'm not sure if you're aware or if you keep up with Premier League, but Stoke are facing your former club Man City in the Premier League this weekend at the Britannia Stadium. So if you could, I'd really like a prediction.
Really like a prediction.
Yeah.
I'll go with Stoke. 1-0.
Yeah, that's quite bold.
Yeah. No, I think Stoke 1-0. Yeah, I think the wheels have got to fall off at some point for City. So I go with Stoke 1-0.
And it's quite lucky that we're talking to you as well, because Stoke have also drawn Tranmere in the League Cup. So if we can get a prediction for that game as well.
Yeah, I think I'd go with Stoke again. I think. Okay. I think we go with Stoke. I think I'd go with 2-0.
2-0. That's brilliant. You're just a Stokie, aren't you, Chris?
Yeah, it's amazing how football just throws up these scenarios. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's been really great talking to Chris, and I wish you and the boys all the best of luck at Wellington this upcoming season.
Oh, that's great, thank you. And again, just want to wish everyone at Stoke all the very best, and just always thankful for the support that I got from the fans and how brief it was. But as I said, it's something that I wouldn't change. So I wish them all the very best.